Hey guys, it's Chelsea from The Financial Diet. And this week I am in my very best Ina Garten shirt because we asked you on Twitter and Instagram to send in some questions for a Q&A video. And you guys sent in a lot of great ones about domestic life. So I thought I'd do a fun video that is answering kind of a lot of these lifestyle questions around food, home, entertaining, wardrobe, plants, living in an apartment, and all that kind of stuff. I'm very into homemaking on a budget as well as cooking at home, and hopefully in this video I can transmit some of that love to you guys. And if you can't make your perfect budget from scratch, store-bought is just fine. What is your go-to meal to impress people when you're on a budget? So like the number one meal that I feel like is very fancy compared to how expensive it is to produce and like has such a wow factor is French onion soup, particularly if you can make it, like if you get individual bowls that are oven safe, or you can use like big ramekins, bowls. I have these little stove cocottes that are like white and in the shape of little squash kind of. But basically just serving anything in individual bowls is automatically like such a wow factor. But there are a few things that are cheaper to make, especially in volume, than soup. And this soup doesn't even have any meat in it, which is usually the most expensive part of any soup. It actually doesn't even have any fresh produce, which is also like fairly expensive too. I mean, I guess the onions and garlic are fresh, but it's not like refrigerated produce, which is often also can be rather expensive. But the soup itself is like pretty peasant-like. And then obviously you use old bread is the whole point of like the croutons. Like you don't even use new good bread for it. And then you obviously have the cheese that you put on top of it. But I find personally that when you're putting the cheese on it, I do way more mozzarella and then a little bit of Gruyere and like a little bit of like pecorino or something, because the Gruyere is obviously for the flavor and stuff, but mozzarella melts way better and it's also way less expensive. So you can even adjust the proportions of the cheese. Long story short, and also like, you know, sprinkle a little bit of parsley on there to make it feel really well. But anyway, long story short, French onion soup is incredibly easy. You can make it ahead of time, ladle it into those bowls, put the croutons and cheese in there, pop it under the broiler, and everyone's like, wow, this is spectacular, and it's super cheap. As newlyweds, what has been the biggest financial challenge or decision for you and Mark? First of all, this person is canceled. They spelled Mark with a K. He would never. His name is Mark with a C. I mean, as newlyweds, there's really no answer to that because we've been living together for years and we were domestic partners and had combined finances before we got married. So there really haven't been any decisions since we've been married that we weren't faced with before. We do, you know, as we move through life, we have to make decisions, but none of them have really been based on being married. And honestly, to some extent, like I know people who are very hesitant to combine finances at all before marriage. But I do find that, you know, having been so financially intimate for several years made it all the more clear that marriage was the right choice, because money is the thing that most people fight over and is the biggest cause of divorce. And that's something that we knew we basically get along on. So yeah, we really haven't, as newlyweds, had many challenges. I feel like my general philosophy on marriage is if it feels really different after you get married, I kind of feel like it's almost a red flag. I don't know. I don't know. I like being married. It's cool that we're family and it's nice that other people, I think I once heard someone say, marriage is nice because now everyone treats your relationship the way you feel about it. Like saying my husband has just such a level of seriousness that like boyfriend or God forbid fiance doesn't have. But other than that, everything feels exactly the same. And I feel like that's the most healthy way to feel. But you know, everyone's got a completely different blueprint to marriage. Go-to meals for a dinner party. Anything that you can make ahead of time, and or it's like a one pot thing. Like I have learned the hard way that anything that requires a lot of like right before serving kind of like production is the worst thing you can make. I've done a couple dinner parties where I've tried kind of like a lot of, for example, Asian dishes have a lot of stuff to do right before serving and are very sensitive to needing to be served right when you make them. Like a good example would be anything that goes in a wok. And I've had a couple of parties where I tried those things and I basically felt like my own housekeeper because I was like in the kitchen the entire time and like could barely interact with people and was extremely panicked. And so I just don't make that kind of stuff for dinner parties anymore. I tend to make things that are like for example, a nice pasta sauce that can be made well ahead of time, or something that can be totally prepared and then popped in the oven, like a potato gratin or something like that. Basically anything that is really, really low maintenance, especially right before, like the 30 minutes before serving and during serving, and also that isn't overly sensitive to needing to be served the second it comes off the stove. Like another example is like never make a risotto for a dinner party, because if you don't get a risotto like 45 seconds after it leaves the stovetop, you're eating like a big, plate of glue essentially. So just be very, very, relieve as much pressure from yourself as you possibly can. Also, anything you're very comfortable with. It is so easy to want to like test out this exciting new recipe from a cookbook at a dinner party, but like, what a mistake. You want to go with the tried and true classics that you know that you can not only make under any circumstances, but also have a really good ability to save if something goes wrong. And especially if you're making a new meal, when something goes slightly wrong making that meal, you've never made it before, so you don't know how to like compensate for it or what you can swap in if you're missing an ingredient. A dinner party should be above all about enjoying yourself and enjoying your company. And you can't do that if you're spending all your time freaking out in the kitchen. This isn't even a question. It has like 5 exclamation points though. Business casual clothing on a budget. Where does Chelsea shop, and suggestions for sustainable fashion in the workplace, please and thanks. You know what's kind of sad to admit is that I don't really know that I shop at many super sustainable places. I know that some places have better practices than others, but I'm not as well versed in all of the different companies and their practices with regards to sustainability as I should be. I typically, for any like bigger ticket purchases, like a winter coat or what have you, I'll typically go to like a Marshalls or a TJ Maxx. I was actually just there yesterday at a TJ Maxx and got myself a little winter jacket. But for day to day, I always do J. Crew, Banana Republic, Loft, and sometimes Ann Taylor. They have really good sales. I typically buy stuff at those stores because it's never trendy, so therefore it's never out of style. I try to always focus on things that are super interchangeable with the rest of my wardrobe and super timeless. Personally, I feel like for business casual, you always want to go to the highest end you can afford and either shop like super duper sales or try to go to those stores like TJ Maxx and Marshalls. Just because business casual, above all, what you notice most about it in the workplace is the fit. And the quality of the material, and you don't want to be wearing something that you're pulling at, or it's pilling, or the seams are puckering. Like, you want to wear something that feels polished. I'm also a huge proponent of tailoring. I specifically like to tailor my jeans when I buy them, if I buy a really nice pair, just because jeans are one of the things that you wear almost every day, and a good pair of jeans can completely make or break an outfit. And if you have a normal human body, it's basically impossible to buy a pair of women's jeans off the rack and have them fit perfectly everywhere. So I just go ahead and buy them in the size that I can take in a little bit here and there and get them tailored as if they were made by hand for me. Please tell us the story of how you got Mona. Well, let's ask her. Oh my God, she's so lazy. Mona! So I would love to tell you the story of how I got Mona. So long story short, her mom was a hoe. And got knocked up in a backyard in Queens. No, in all seriousness, so her mom is Havanese and Maltese. And she, so like a little bit bigger than Mona. Havanese, in my opinion, by the way, like the best, most underrated little dogs. They have such chill personalities. But so she was living at, in this house in Queens, and like in a lot of places in Queens, it's very residential. So you have like standalone houses with yards and fences, which is what the situation was. In the house was this, older woman, and 2 of her like early 20-something grandchildren. This will be relevant in a moment. So basically at one point they were like, why is our dog getting so fat? Took her to the vet. Turns out she was pregnant. And they were like, what? Like, how is this even physically possible? She's never out of our sight, unless she's in the backyard, which has like a, 6-foot tall fence or whatever. Like, this makes no sense. So goes on and on. The dog's like pregnant or whatever, like about to, have babies. And one day, like one of them is like out on the back porch, and they see there's like a tiny Pomeranian who's like a male who's like half the size of her mom. This is her father. And he was scaling the fence like little by little, like using his teeth to pull himself up with a raging boner. And they were like, okay, I guess we know how our dog got pregnant. So anyway, long story short, they put up an ad like on, I can't remember if it was Craigslist or it was like a Facebook group, but they posted a thing that was like, we have so many dogs, like come take a dog. And here's puppy Mona, so you can only imagine how much I was freaking out. So anyway, Mona was adopted from a family in Queens, and she's a survivor. How did you go from killing every plant you ever had to being a thriving plant mom? Don't get any plants unless you also get those little globe feeders that you can put in the plant while you're away, because without them, they will just never thrive. And also, it's not even just for when you go out of town. It's also like if you have a really busy week and you know you realistically might forget watering them for a bit, just stick that little globe in there. Also, just go with plants that are really hardy. Like in the TFD office, we have a fiddle leaf fig tree. Because we have an enormous window that has perfect exposure, but we would never otherwise, I would never have a tree like that at home because I just don't have the lighting for it. Like, you need to know the trees that can thrive in the home that you have. There are certain plants that I could recommend for like anyone, things like snake plants, ZZs, parlor palms. I have a Dracaena or a corn plant, which is like, it looks like a tree, but it's actually a plant. Those things, like, you can bring them to the brink of death and they will come back and thrive again. You know, just be really honest with yourself about how much maintenance and care you're willing to give a plant. Make sure you get ones that are adapted to the home or space that you have. And don't get a tree or anything substantial until you've proven to yourself that you can take care of several smaller plants. Because even just like transporting and repotting a tree is incredibly delicate and you can kill it by doing it wrong. So work your way up. Tips for decorating in a small space. So I'm actually moving in a few weeks, and our new place, it's like a block away from here, but it's 950 square feet, which is the most space I've ever lived in. It's enormous for Manhattan, but it's also, to me, just like enormous for two people. And I'm frankly overwhelmed at having to decorate that space just because there's so much of it. And I think that in many ways, decorating a smaller space is easier and better. I think having constraints in any kind of design situation is always a good thing, because not only does it force you to be a little bit more creative, it also really forces you to pick what's important and pick what you really love. Like anytime I go out to, you know, the suburbs or smaller towns where people have really big homes, there's always at least one room that either completely doesn't get used or just has just never ever been really decorated or even properly furnished. And it's just kind of like their, you know, forget it room or their junk room. And to me, that's very sad, not only because it's hugely wasteful, but because every space in your home to me should be a space that is loved and a space that reflects you and a space that is really doing its best work, let's say. And that's not a problem you ever have in a small space, because there are no spare rooms and there's nowhere for you to just forget about. So that said, I think small spaces are better. The number one tip for decorating any small space is go up. Lots of shelving, lots of things that are mounted on the wall, lots of things that make use of vertical space so that you can, you know, not have to like figure out floor room for absolutely everything. But also because the more functional something is, the more intentional and thoughtful, and if you do it right, beautiful it will look. You know, it's very easy to have walls covered with a bunch of like, you know, just pretty frames, but having, you know, a mounted shelf made out of like beautiful raw wood and like with nice brackets and having beautiful things on it as well as some functional stuff, like that's a really nice form and function moment. Also mirrors, and put those mirrors up where they can really catch the light. Especially in New York, light is at a premium, and if you have a little bit of it, you want to maximize it. So those are two of the biggest ones. Lastly, I would just say make sure everything has its place. It is so easy in a small space to have junk shelves, which I'm currently looking at right now, and it stresses me out every time I look at it. Or just like piles of things, because storage is always at a premium. So again, like for example, if you have an armoire or something you can build into the wall or whatever it may be, like make sure that there is plenty of storage that you are really maximizing so that you're not just constantly dealing with little piles of things everywhere. We don't have junk rooms in these little apartments, so get rid of your junk. Is it really a TFD video if you don't mention the concept of meal prepping? Ew, go away. What sites or apps do you use to buy affordable flight tickets? I am living and dying by my Delta status. I only fly Delta and Delta Partners now, because if that is available to you, once you work up loyalty with an airline and work up miles with an airline, which I also do through my credit cards, in the long term, it's much cheaper to go with one airline over and over than it is to constantly be gaming for the lowest price. But I do recognize that that is a high barrier to entry, and that's something I've only been able to really do as of late. And that's obviously a long-term investment in the eventual cost. Like now I'm able to buy like half my tickets every year just through miles, but that obviously took some doing. If you are just looking to maximize the value of each individual ticket, I use a few things. If it's a trip that I'm open on the destination, I follow things like Scott's Cheap Flights, which are always advertising like really, really great deals between two cities. I used Hopper, the app that will tell you like the best time to buy for any particular ticket. And Google Flights is always a good one for aggregating every single ticket on a given day. Okay, so last one, and this one's obviously a bit of a departure, but I thought it would be nice to talk about. Tell us about the new podcast. So I don't know if you guys saw, but we've been sharing kind of all around the TFD universe about a new show that we're doing that's going to be premiering on Monday, November 18th here on our YouTube channel, but also will be released as a podcast everywhere you love to listen to podcasts. It's called The Financial Confessions, and we're going to be interviewing all types of people, reality stars, influencers, financial experts, CEOs, whatever, any and all in between, just about how they do money, mistakes, lessons, the news of the day, all that kind of stuff. Basically, it's just a place to talk about money with interesting people in kind of a long-form, fun way. For those of you who prefer to watch your podcast, which I actually do myself when possible, it'll be every Monday here on TFD. And then if not, also all over, the various podcast networks. And I would love to know any guests that you would love to see on the show. So just leave that in the comments section and we'll be reading them and reaching out to those people because we'd love to have the guests that you guys are most interested in hearing from about money. We're so excited. So that's it for my very Ina Garten Q&A. I hope you guys enjoyed. This was a lot of fun to go through, and I will see you guys next week. So as always, thank you for watching, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and to come back every Tuesday and Thursday, and soon to be Monday, for new and awesome videos. Bye.